Hello everyone and welcome to Split Second. This week we received Rodrigo once again, one of our local friends. He brought his Minsk deck around spicy Protean Hulk lines. Helder brought his Lord of Stresserhorn Infect for another trial run. Late is piloting Chatternaus by Hosting Helm, and Bal is once again on Marin of Clan Null Toth, Pao 2's list. Before we show you starting hands, we would like to announce that we now have our playmats available through Patreon. If you like these babies, check out our Patreon page for more information on how to get one of these signed by the Split Second team and shipped to your door. Rodrigo won the role and he kept his first 7, with a bit of everything: Temple Garden and Mana Confluence for lands, with no ramp but with an Enlightened Tutor to maybe fix that. Recruiter of the Guard can be used to find Rector and win from there, as well as Natural Order that can find Protean Hulk and win as well, with access to Minsk. Outland Liberator is Koglan Caustic Caterpillar's son, picture that. Unexpectedly Absent is always a versatile interaction. Elder also kept his first 7 with the Lucky Gemstone Caverns, Watery Grave and Volcanic Island with a Mana Vault and Arcane Signet for ramp. Plenty of mana to start with a Preordain to try to dig for an outlet to get his commander out, and he still has a Miscast for interaction. Late is also on the trend of first 7s, with plenty of ramp and removal, City of Brass and Polluted Delta for lands, with his Sol Ring, Birds of Paradise and Gilded Goose for ramp, and the latter also helps with his commander, Abrupt Decay and Slaughter Path for much needed interaction. Lastly, Bal mulliganed once and found a Prismatic Vista, Wooded Foothills and Mana Confluence for lands, with a Carpet of Flowers versus 2 blue decks. Imperial Seal can be used for a combo piece or to find Entomb, to use it with Reanimate, and Mind Slicer can be used as protection before going off, or to grind the match if needed. Ready for this match? Before the game starts, Elder announces his pre-game action, putting Gemstone Caverns into play and exiling Watery Grave, to much sadness from Bal's Carpet. Rodrigo then starts his turn with a Mana Confluence and passes the turn. Elder then ends up playing an island, but not just any island, a volcanic one. He casts a Preordain, scrying both to the bottom and drawing. He then casts the top decked Mana Crypt and follows it with his Arcane Signet, holding onto his vault to have mana for interaction. Late plays a Polluted Delta and cracks it for a Bayou. He casts a Birds of Paradise and passes as well. Bal plays a Wooded Foothills and cracks it for a Bayou as well. He casts his Carpet of Flowers and it resolves, so he goes to his second main phase, adding black with it and casts Imperial Seal. Helder responds with a miscast however, as it wouldn't be able to hit any other targets from Bal's deck. In his end step, Rodrigo casts an Enlightened Tutor and it resolves, searching for a Mana Crypt to the top. Rodrigo draws the Crypt and casts it. He then plays a Temple Garden untapped, paying 2 life, and casts an Outland Liberator, entering the battlefield becoming day and finishing his turn. Elder loses his first Crypt roll. He simply draws and passes, ulting some tricks. Since he didn't cast any spell, it becomes night as Late taps for his turn, transforming Outland Liberator in Frenzied Trap Breaker, Mini Kogla. He plays a City of Brass and casts a Praetor's Grasp, targeting Rodrigo. They do this in a way no one knows what card it is, but his confidence clearly hints at a Dockside Extortionist. Bal gets to his turn and simply plays a Prismatic Vista, passing afterwards as his game plan was relying on the tutor to resolve. Rodrigo rolls and takes 3 from the Crypt. He plays an untapped Sacred Foundry, paying 2 life. He then goes to combat, attacking Elder and triggering his Frenzied Trap Breaker, targeting Arcane Signet, to deprive Elder from much needed colored mana. He then gets to his second main phase and casts his commander, Varys the Eunuch, Minsk Beloved Ranger. It enters, triggering and bringing with him his cute little boo. He passes afterwards and Elder now wins his crit roll. The loss of the Signet hindered Elder's plans quite a bit, so he's forced to pass. In his end step, Bal cracks his Vista, searching for a swamp just before Late taps. He draws and plays an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, making Bal regret his basic land choice. He casts his Sol Ring and then casts his commander as well, setting up for his big play, casting Rodrigo's Dockside Extortionist. Elder responds with a Brainstorm, hoping to find something, but finds nothing, so it resolves, entering and triggering to create 3 treasures. Due to Shatterfang, he also creates 3 Squirrel tokens. He then passes, and since he casts 2 spells this turn, it becomes day as Bal taps for his turn. He adds 1 pink mana from Carpet and plays a Windswept Heath that he cracks for a Forest, and then casts a Mind Slicer as a blocker to deter attacks and maybe sacrifice it in case discarding Late's hand is really needed. Rodrigo wins his Crypt roll and he could go for a win here with his Natural Order, but all those Squirrel tokens prevent him from achieving the win. He plays a Spectator Sitting and then casts a Recruiter of the Guard, entering and finding an Esper Sentinel that he also casts, finishing his turn. Elder wins his Crypt roll and plays a Misty Rain Forest. He thinks for a bit but ends up passing, and because he didn't cast any spells, it becomes night as Late taps. He draws and then casts a Green Sun Zenith for 4, triggering Esper Sentinel and paying for it. He tutors for a Toski and proceeds to attacks right away. He sends 5 creatures at Helder, triggering Toski 5 times, for 5 draws. He draws 3 and holds on the following ones, by casting Vampiric Tutor for a Pitiless Plunder to the top. He then draws the last 2 cards and proceeds to his second main phase, plays an Undergrowth Stadium and casts a Dark Ritual. With that mana he casts Pitiless Plunderer. In response, however, Rodrigo casts an Unexpectedly Absent on Shatterfang to put it on top of Late's library. In response, Late casts a Slaughter Pact on Minsc, and then still responds by activating Shatterfang, sacrificing 3 squirrels to kill Baal's Mind Slicer, so everyone discards their hands and he can recoup easily with his Toski. He passes the turn and on Baal's untap step it becomes day. He draws the 4th land in 5 draws, generates 1 pink mana from Carpet, plays a swamp and casts Meren of Clan Nel Toth as his only possible play. He goes to his end step, triggering her to return Mind Slicer to his hand and passes. Rodrigo once again is safe from the Crypt. He jumps to combat, attacking Helder with his tiny Boo. In his second main phase he casts Minsc once again, bringing another Boo, and he puts the tapped one in his graveyard due to the legend rule. In his end step, Elder cracks his Misty Rainforest for a Steam Vents, which also happens to tap for black. What a Necropolis he has there! He rolls for the Crypt and wins it. He top decks a good recovering card, Rhystic Study. It triggers Esper Sentinel and he pays for it before passing. In his end step, Rodrigo cracks his Outland Liberator to destroy Late's Sol Ring and cut down his options for his next turn. This way, Late taps and pays for the Pact trigger. He draws his commander and goes to combat, attacking Helder for 3. Toski triggers 3 times and he draws 3. He then plays a Nurturing Peatland and eventually casts his Shatterfang, triggering Rhystic and unable to pay, before passing the turn. Baal draws yet another land. He adds 2 black mana from Carpet and casts his Mind Slicer, triggering Rhystic and not paying, hoping that Helder can draw into a solution to Late's board. He plays his City of Brass and attacks Late for 3, before going to his end step, triggering Meren to return Protean Hulk from the graveyard as his only creature. Rodrigo now loses his Crypt roll, he simply draws and casts a Bloom Tender, paying for the Rhystic and passing his turn. Helder untaps and also loses his Crypt roll. He finds yet more mana in Sol Ring, triggering Sentinel and paying for it before passing. Late plays a Prismatic Vista and cracks it for a Forest. He then convokes a Court of Calling for 2, triggering Sentinel and Rhystic and paying for both. However, as Blood Artist waves Late in the horizon, Elder responds with a Pact of Negation. Esper Sentinel triggers and Elder does pay for it. With his plans foiled once again, Late casts a Verdant Command, paying for the Rhystic and choosing to create 2 squirrels and gaining 3 life. Due to Shatterfang, he also gets that many treasure tokens as well. Late announces 2 squirrels, but somehow in his mind the 3 life gain makes him put 3 squirrel tokens on the battlefield. This, however, didn't change much of the outcome of the game. Now, he is able to clear the whole board by activating Shatterfang, cracking 1 treasure for black mana and sacrificing 1 squirrel as an additional cost, and targeting a creature to receive +1/-1 until end of turn. Doing so triggers Pitiless Plunderer, which creates a treasure, and therefore Shatterfang replaces that with a treasure and a squirrel token. This way, he targets Esper Sentinel to receive the first +1/-1 effect until end of turn. However, Elder does respond to it with a Deflecting Swat, changing the target to Toski, effectively killing this indestructible rodent. Late gets 1 treasure and 1 squirrel from this loss, and then proceeds to kill all of Rodrigo's creatures, followed by Meren and lastly Mind Slicer, so Baal doesn't get any experience counters. Mind Slicer triggers and everyone discards their hands. Late then passes with the possibility to kill anything that hits the board, still only needing a Blood Artist-like effect. Baal draws and is forced to pass, as no creatures will stick. Rodrigo is once again safe from his Crypt. He draws and as a team effort he casts Finorn Elves, triggering Rhystic and not paying, hoping Elder can come up with a solution to this sniping machine. In his end step, Late does kill the elf. Elder wins his Crypt roll and pays for the Pact trigger. He draws and plays a Flooded Strand, forced to pass as well. Late draws and goes straight into combat. Thankfully for the rest of the table, Toski is no longer alive, or else this would be an easy win for Late. He sends everything towards Elder, and after some math, he does some combat tricks, activating Shatterfang to sacrifice an attacking squirrel, to give +1/-1 to Dockside Extortionist, gaining a treasure and a squirrel in the process, which he also sacrificed to give +1/-1 to Pitiless Plunderer, gaining another treasure and another squirrel, repeating this process to pump the Plunderer to a 4/1 and Shatterfang to a 5/1, for a total of 14 damage, so Elder might die to his Crypt roll or is dead to Late's board anyway. He passes afterwards and Baal top decks a possible game-changing card, Necromancy. However, Late's board is still able to kill anything that he throws at it, so after some consideration he gets 2 black mana from Carpet and does flash in Necromancy, triggering and paying for the Rhystic Study. It enters and it returns Protean Hulk to the battlefield. He proceeds to his cleanup step and Necromancy triggers to be sacrificed, which in turn sacrifices Protean Hulk, triggering it. Elder and Late each have 1 card in hand and can't do anything, so Baal searches for a Sylvan Safekeeper, Collector Oof and Eternal Witness, which also triggers and it targets Necromancy in the graveyard. Late had used his lands in his previous turn to bank in some treasures, so now with his treasures shut down, he only has 3 sources of mana to attempt to kill Oof. He activates Shatterfang, paying 1 to give +1/-1 to Sylvan Safekeeper, hoping to deter Bal's attention to it. In response, Bal sacrifices a swamp with Safekeeper to give Shroud to Oof, which prompts Late to respond to it with Shatterfang, sacrificing another squirrel to give +1/-1 to Collector Oof, which Bal responds to by sacrificing another swamp, with the Safekeeper to give Shroud to Oof. In response, Late taps his last source of mana and sacrifices 2 squirrels to give +2/-2 to Oof. Bal then floats 1 green mana and sacrifices the forest with Safekeeper to give Shroud to the Oof, effectively saving it. With the first Shatterfang activation aimed at Sylvan Safekeeper, Bal floats 1 black with his Bayou and sacrifices it to give Shroud to Safekeeper, as Elder and Late still have 1 card in hand, and Bal will give another one to Elder through the next Necromancy cast. Eternal Witness's trigger now resolves, returning Necromancy to his hand, and there is a round of priority before this cleanup step ends, which will generate another cleanup step. Bal uses his floating mana and flashes in Necromancy again, triggering Rhystic Study but unable to pay. Elder draws but finds nothing, so Necromancy once again reanimates Protean Hulk. He passes to his next cleanup step and Necromancy triggers, sacrificing Protean Hulk to find Melira, Sylvok Outcast, Lesser Massacre, Viscera Seer, Disciple of the Vault and Dryad Arbor, because as the new cleanup step just begun, all his end of turn Shroud effects from Sylvan Safekeeper have ended, and this way he is now able to still have 2 activations to try to protect his combo, which relies on him sacrificing Lesser Massacre with Viscera Seer to scry 1, triggering Disciple of the Vault, and pinging an opponent. Because Lesser Massacre has persisted, it will be returned to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter, but due to Melira, that -1/-1 counter cannot be placed, which allows him to sacrifice Lesser Massacre endlessly to Viscera Seer and triggering Disciple of the Vault to kill the entire table. GG. As this was quite a short match, we decided to play another one. This time Late won the dice roll and is going first. He kept his first 7 with a pretty fast hand as well. Snow-covered Swamp, Bayou and City of Brass for lands, with Jeweled Lotus and Sol Ring for ramp, as well as Deathrite Shaman. He still has an Imperial Seal to find an outlet. Bal mulliganed once and didn't want to go lower, keeping a single forest but with an Arbor Elf and Deathrite Shaman for ramp, Sylvan Safekeeper for protection and Eternal Witness for recursion. He has Buried Alive and Life Death, for a main plan to cheat some creature into play. Rodrigo kept his first 7 with a Forest, a Plains and Prismatic Vista for lands, Llanowar Elves for ramp, Flamescroll Celebrant can be key at stopping Bal's Hulk line, and Revel in Silence is also good interaction. Welcoming Vampire can be great at slowly sandbagging some cards to go off, and Rebraid is versatile removal. Lastly, Elder mulliganed once and found quite a fast hand, Command Tower and Cavern of Souls for lands, with a Mox Diamond and Jeweled Lotus for ramp. Dress Down is great at bypassing his commander's downside, and if that goes wrong, he still has Bitter Blossom to get 2 fairies to sacrifice as fodder, in case he needs to recast Lord of Tressorhorn, but with Deflecting Swat at the ready, removal will be hard to hit it. Let's see how this one unfolds. Late starts his turn with a Bayou and casts an Imperial Seal for an Acererak, as he plans to go for a simple 2-card combo. Bal plays a Forest and casts his Arbor Elf, passing the turn. Rodrigo also plays a Forest and casts Llanowar Elves, ending his turn. Elder plays a Command Tower and then casts a Mox Diamond, discarding his Cavern of Souls and passing to Late. He actually exiles it, momentarily thinking about Chrome's Mox imprint, but this doesn't change much of the outcome of the game. Late plays a City of Brass and casts his Sol Ring, passing the turn. Bal fails to draw a land, so he casts his Deathrite Shaman and untaps his Forest with Arbor Elf to cast Sylvan Safekeeper before passing, not looking to activate it anytime soon. Rodrigo plays a Plains and casts Welcoming Vampire, hoping to slowly get some value from that. In his end step, Elder reveals his master plan and casts Dress Down. It stays over to his turn, where he casts Jeweled Lotus. He plays a Bloodstained Mire and casts his commander, Lord of Tressorhorn. Because of Dress Down, it enters without abilities and bypasses his downsides. He goes to his end step and Late casts a Vampiric Tutor, aiming for an Alluran. However, Elder responds with a Mental Misstep, denying Late his turn 3 win. Late gets to his turn, plays a Snow-covered Swamp and casts a Deathrite Shaman. He follows it with Jeweled Lotus as well, and Shatterfang Squirrel General hits the field for 0 mana. We're now on Bal's turn and he finds no land, but he does cast Earthcraft, maintaining access to green with his creatures as he passes. Rodrigo plays a Prismatic Vista and cracks it for a mountain, enabling him to cast his commander, Minsc, Beloved Ranger, bringing his Fierce Boo along, triggering Welcoming Vampire for a draw. He finds and casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Flamescroll Celebrant, and with it he casts Outland Liberator, entering Unbecoming Day. In his end step, Elder cracks his Bloodstained Mire for a tapped Blood Crypt. He gets to his turn and goes straight to combat, attacking Rodrigo for 10, who feels forced to block with his Boo, just in case a Wild Tainted Strike appears once again. He then passes, and on Late's untap step, it becomes Night, transforming Outland Liberator. Late top decks and casts Praetor's Grasp, but instead of targeting the red decks for Docksides, he targets Bal, and gets a Vampiric Tutor, still aiming to get Alluran. He passes, and on his end step, Bal untaps his forest with Earthcraft, and tries to exile Rodrigo's Prismatic Vista, but late responds and activates his own Deathrite Shaman to deny that mana from Bal. He then gets to his turn and once again finds no lands, so he's forced to pass. Rodrigo draws and goes to combat, attacking Bal with Frenzied Trap Breaker, triggering and targeting Earthcraft. Bal responds by activating Deathrite, exiling Elder's Fetch, and casts Abrupt Decay on Late's Deathrite Shaman, to take some mana from him, as well as remove his potential to eat creatures from his Buried Alive. He still untaps his forest with Earthcraft and declares no blockers. Rodrigo then gets to his second main phase and casts Recruiter of the Guard, triggering Welcoming Vampire and himself, so he tutors for a Dockside Extortionist and then draws a card, but passes without casting it. Elder plays his Swamp and casts his Bitter Blossom. He then attacks late for 10 and he blocks with Shatterfang, respecting that infect potential. Elder then passes and on his end step, late casts Bal's Vampiric Tutor, exiled through Praetor's Grasp. He ponders but ends up getting Ad Nauseam to the top to hopefully get more cards this way, and then goes to his turn. He draws it but simply passes, hoping to go unnoticed. Bal still hasn't found any land, so he simply casts a Caustic Caterpillar and passes the turn. Rodrigo got something from waiting for his Dockside Extortionist, as he now gets 3 treasures when it enters. Welcoming Vampire also triggers and he draws a card. He plays Karplusan Forest and he then proceeds to combat. He attacks Elder with Frenzied Trapbreaker, triggering it and targeting Elder's Mox Diamond, still trying to deny players off of their mana. In his second main phase, a bit desperate on his options, he hardcasts Turntimber Symbiosis. In response, Bal untaps his forest with Arbor Elf, just in case a Wildling Viola appears. Rodrigo finds a Toski and then passes the turn. On Elder's upkeep, it becomes day and he gets a Fairy token from his Bitter Blossom. He then goes Hammering mode, attacking late to 4/10, and passing the turn fully untapped. On his end step, however, late fires an Ad Nauseam, which does resolve. He goes quite deep, trying to find some way, sticking with plenty of mana, Yogg Will and Demonic Consultation as notable cards. He goes to his turn and it becomes night once again. He starts things with a Mana Crypt, after which he plays a Nurturing Peatland to cast Culling Ritual, wiping most of the board and generating 6 black and 6 green mana. He then ponders for a bit and starts with a Lotus Petal. He has 2 options, Yogg Will into Praetor's Grasp Bal for Demonic Tutor to get Aluren, or the risky path, which he prefers to take. He casts Demonic Consultation and names Aluren, slowly rolling the top 6. And he's safe. He exiles one more and hits it right away. He then casts his Yawgmoth's Will and it resolves. He then casts from his graveyard Mana Crypt, followed by Jeweled Lotus, and then Sol Ring as well. He then casts Praetor's Grasp, targeting Bal in hopes to get Veil of Summer. Elder thinks he wants a Demonic Tutor from Bal, therefore he responds with a Deflecting Swat, changing the target to Rodrigo, so he has no black tutors. However, as late is resolving the Grasp, he finds something better than Veil of Summer, so exiles it and casts it right away, a Grand Abolisher. With that staple resolving, he shows Aluren and a Serarak, and wins the game by infinitely casting a Serarak for free with Aluren, entering and venturing into the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which will eventually drain the table each time he goes through the Dark Pool. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match, everyone. Game 1 was greatly influenced by how Late got such a fast start, and took advantage from Mindslicer's trigger to have less to no interaction while Toski was refilling his hand. However, that Necromancy stole his win in a timely fashion. During Game 2, Late also had access to plenty of tutors, while Elder was mostly drawing restrictive interaction. Rodrigo was really close to winning in both games, but there was always plenty of removal available, so he tried to police the board with Frenzied Trap Breaker, but eventually the Nauseam gate Late everything by the sheer power of Culling Ritual. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, TJ Rapp, Mike Purr, Ajimu, Drunken Housecat, V, RJ, Heated Chill, Pina, Ricardo, Dragonstake, Katerina, Michael Bowen and Super Scaldi, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Join us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.